welcome to Guitar Gods Unleashed. I just want to do a follow-up video on the top 10 fastest guitar players of the 70s and just talk about it a bit more in depth, about some of the players that we encountered in that video. I mean, there were lots of great guitar players in the 70s. You had like Jimi Hendrix, which, I mean, he was around for a year and then he died in 1970, but he was around. I mean, I've always wondered what Hendrix would have done next. Would he have gone into heavy metal, more heavy stuff? Would he have gone more into jazz or funk or fusion or something, or done more of a hippie thing? I mean, it's really interesting to see where Hendrix would have gone in the future. Imagine Hendrix as well in the 80s with keyboards and stuff, like what he would have done with that. Oh, that would be incredible. But he also had great players like Jimmy Page and Tony Iommi and Jeff Beck. And Clapton was there. Angus Young. You also had like Chet Atkins. I like Chet Atkins as well. He was great. Lots of great players there. But one of the best players around at the time, I think, was Michael Schenker. Michael Schenker in UFO. He actually started in Scorpions' Lonesome Crow, that album, 1972, which is kind of so different. It's not really like a Scorpions album. It's very kind of odd. The UFO albums with Michael Schenker, like I would say check out Force It and Phenomenon, No Heavy Petting and Lights Out, Strangers in the Night. That just great stuff. Schenker was one of the best in that time. Also, he played on the Scorpions album Love Drive in 1979. He played on some of the tracks. Mateus Jabs played on some of them, but Schenker played on some of it as well. I think that's one of Scorpions' best albums. And then Schenker went on to do the Michael Schenker group in the 80s. But also players in the 70s, you had Uli John Roth, who was in the Scorpions. Great player, and he was kind of like Hendrixy as well, but he also had a classical thing that he went into. He sort of like bridges the gap, I feel, between Blackmore and then it's like Blackmore and Uli, and then Randy Rhoads and Yngwie. It's sort of like Uli's in that middle bit there. And the Scorpions albums are great with Uli, like Fly to the Rainbow and In Trance, Virgin Killer. But my favourite one is Taken by Force. That album is amazing. Check out the guitar playing on that album. Also the live album, Tokyo Tapes. That's a great live album. Uli rips it up on that album. And then he went off after that and did his own thing, Electric Sun or something, the band. And he did some solo albums in the 80s. Also, you had some players like Al Di Meola, who did some solo albums in the 70s. And then he played with Chick Corea, I think. Return to Forever, I think he was on some of that stuff. That's like more fusion-y stuff. It's not really my sort of thing. I listen to it occasionally, but I do like it. But he did some solo albums, which are really worth checking out. You also had John McLaughlin, who is very fast player. And he was around even in the 60s and stuff, doing all that sort of stuff. And he was in the Mahavishnu, I can't even say the word, he was in the Mahavishnu Orchestra, I can't even say that. But he was in that band, ripping it up there, sort of like proggy, fusion-y stuff. And he also did some solo albums as well. So check out John McLaughlin's stuff. He's one of the great 70s players. Also, don't forget Ritchie Blackmore. I think he was one of the greatest players in his day. Deep Purple, the albums In Rock and Fireball, and probably my favourite is Machine Head. That's just great. I mean, Highway Star, I think, is one of the best solos ever recorded. Actually, the best rock solo ever. And you had Smoke on the Water on that album, which is, people overlook that. They think, oh yeah, that riff, but Smoke on the Water, it's actually a great track, you know? Great song, great solo. I mean, Deep Purple were great, but they were even better live, apparently. Obviously, I wasn't live then, but everyone's that I've read about it and seen videos of it, they were more of a live band that just absolutely really rocked it up, and they smashed up their amps occasionally and stuff and went crazy. Ritchie Blackmore was just insane. And he was a session player, actually, in the 60s. He'd been around for a long time already, before the Deep Purple thing happened. And then there were some arguments in the band. I think he fell out with Ian Gillan and stuff, and like David Coverdale came in and all that, Glenn Hughes. And then Ritchie Blackmore went on to do Rainbow with Ronnie James Dio. And those albums are really worth checking out. The guitar playing is just top notch. Long Live Rock and Roll and Rising, those albums are great. Yeah, so check Ritchie Blackmore's stuff out in the 70s. One of the great players. Some other great players in the 70s, you had obviously like Gary Moore was there, and he was in Thin Lizzy for a while and stuff. I mean, Gary Moore was just a hell of a player, and he carried on into the 80s as well. But do not forget the ultimate player, I think, from the 70s, the greatest guitar player, if there is such a thing, from the 70s, who just was a game changer, Eddie Van Halen. I mean, Eddie Van Halen were around for quite a few years before they recorded their first album. But Eddie Van Halen, 1977, that album was recorded, I believe, in August 77, the first album. And just, I don't think anyone had heard anything like that. I mean, I can still listen to that today, and it's just such an amazing album. The first Van Halen album, and Van Halen 2 is good as well. But Eddie he just, absolute game changer, man. Tapping and pinch harmonics, dive bombs, fast licks. He was playing there, tremolo picking, all that stuff. He was like the perfect package, and he had great rhythm playing as well. He had great feel in his rhythm playing. It wasn't robotic or nothing. It was really bouncy, and he's just one of the greatest of all time, just without question. And most people seem to love Eddie. He's like, you get some players that like they're split like 50-50. Like a lot of people go, oh yeah, I don't like Malmsteen or Vai. Some people love them, some people hate them. But Eddie Van Halen seems to be like universally liked by almost everybody. There are occasionally people say they don't like him, but from what I've read, most people, like comments and stuff, people say he was just the best, and he really was. The live, I mean, they went on tour with Black Sabbath when they were around, I think it was around the time of their first album, and they just blew Black Sabbath away. They were just something else. They were on fire, Van Halen. Absolutely amazing. Also in the 70s, probably missed a couple of players, but yeah, I mean, you had like Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top, he was great. And you had Judas Priest were doing their thing, like KK Downing and Glenn Tipton. They were really amazing, Judas Priest. You also had from the 70s Dave Gilmour, very popular player, very well liked by a lot of people, very tasteful player, very melodic. He was Pink Floyd. I mean, they did a lot of classic stuff in the 70s. I've never really been into Pink Floyd that much myself, to be honest, but Dark Side of the Moon, yeah, that was a classic album. I know people that they love Pink Floyd and they always rave about them. So Dave Gilmour, well worth checking out for the 70s there. Also, you had Brian May, who was a bit like that as well, very tasteful, melodic player. Queen did some great albums, yeah. Brian May, one of the best of the 70s for sure. Then you had Carlos Santana. Was around in the 70s. He was a great player. And you had Alex Lifeson of Rush. Rush, great band, amazing band. I wasn't so keen on the first couple of albums. I liked the albums, once they got past the first couple, I liked the next few, like Hemispheres and that. But yeah, Alex Lifeson, great soloist, but also a great rhythm player as well, and a great songwriter. It's 70s prog rock. I mean, you can hear the influence on like Dream Theater, bands that came later, because like the time signature changes and stuff, and the riffs. It's really great stuff. It's worth checking out. Alex Lifeson's playing on that. There's also Johnny Winter, and also the Allman Brothers, and the Pat Travers band, some great guitar playing and all that stuff. And Blackfoot, were they around in the 70s? I think they were. Also, there was a guy called Frank Marino, who I've never heard his playing. He was in a band called Mahogany Rush in the 70s, and I honestly just never heard his playing, so I'm going to have to check him out. But apparently he's really good. And then there's also Steve Morse. He was in a band called Dixie Dregs. Well, I thought it was more early 80s, but apparently they were around in the 70s. Steve Morse, yeah, he's a great player. One of the best, yeah, one of the best for sure of the 70s there, definitely. Worth checking out. And you also have Sean Lane. Sean Lane was around in the 70s, although he didn't record. He was in Black Oak, Arkansas, but he didn't record with them. He just toured with them for a while. But there is some footage. I have some footage of Sean Lane shredding it up in the 70s, in the late 70s, about 78.
17 years old. Mr. Sean Lane on guitar.
Sean Lane was just a beast, man. He was a monster. And then obviously in the 80s, and he didn't record a solo album until 92, Powers of 10. But Sean Lane, absolute beast. Wow. Probably missed some players. If I've missed anyone, please let me know in the comments. Then we went into the 80s after that, and that was a whole different ball game. But the 70s was a great time for guitar playing, and it's really good to look back at that stuff. And yeah, good stuff. So who was your favourite player from the 70s? Please let me know in the comments of that as well. And let's talk about it. Please subscribe to the channel, Guitar Gods Unleashed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon for another video.